So that was really the moment. I'm sitting in a cold jail cell. Externally, the world felt so raw to me. I felt like I was naked and getting kicked. All I could do, I just sat in my cell meditating. To get into grief is messy and it's all over. You have to build a safe container. If we suppress our grief and our sadness and our anger, we also suppress our joy, our happiness, and our aliveness.
That's it. Welcome to Going Within, the podcast where I, David Naylor, and our guests dive deep, sharing our transformative journeys with psychedelic therapy and other awakening experiences. As the founder of Within, a psychedelic-assisted therapy clinic in Austin, Texas, I'm dedicated to helping others find profound healing and consciousness expansion using ketamine in a ceremonial approach. Join us as we explore the life-changing potential of going within and listening to inspiring stories of transformation from various life experiences and ceremonies. Thank you for honoring me with your presence and attention today, and I'm so grateful that you're here in all of your infinite wisdom. Now, let's go within. Welcome to the Going Within podcast. Today's guest is Joshua Wenner. Josh is an entrepreneur, filmmaker, veteran, and emotional resilience expert. He has spent the last 20 years growing companies and maximizing human potential and affecting the lives of over 500,000 humans. There's not another person out there that I have met who has gone through this much grief, this much shedding, this much healing to awaken and transform. And now he does it for thousands of people all over the country. It is such an honor to have him on the show, and let's dive right in. So Josh, what does going within mean to you?
I believe everything naturally recurring in nature is both from a micro and a macro perspective. So if I want to change the external, I have to change the internal. So for me, the practice of going there and being internal is really loving my little child, loving my boy, and really my body. So for me, going within is the one person that'll be there with me my entire life. My ultimate life partner is my body. And the relationship between my soul and my body should be the primary relationship in my life. So my ability to go within and actually love the body like it loves me is the ultimate goal of self-love. And if I can do that, I believe my body is my server and my servant, meaning it'll love me so much that it'll let me kill it. And I believe it also generates my reality. So being able to love the body like it loves me, it generates what I'm creating. And so that's the ultimate going within, is loving the body like it loves me.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. What an honor. Getting to know you this past year, I was at Burning Man, actually, my first year at Burning Man. And it was the camp that you helped create, or that you created, your family, I believe, the Wanderers. And I felt so connected to it because I felt like I've been a wanderer my whole life, you know? You can't be found unless you're lost. And I just feel like I've been wandering, and recently I've been found. And so to wind up at your camp and meeting you and to get to know your work, it's been such an honor to build a friendship with you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, brother. Likewise.
Yeah,
If I catch you, instant bromance.
Yes, man. It's instant bromance.
It's very similar stories, very similar backgrounds.
Yeah. And just from the recovery, the healing, the grief work, the trauma work, self-love, boundaries, codependency, oneness, love. I mean, all of it, right? We can talk about so many things in this show. I mean, really what I want to jump into first, though, is with all of the things that have happened to your life, right? The early childhood trauma that we all go through, the grief, the losing of family members that I've lost in my family members. Tell us a little bit about your journey of what happened to you and how you began your healing journey. Just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I grew up more of traditional masculine conditioning, where it was sports, athletics, hunting, fishing, camping, put it in a nice little box and
that's right.
Go handle things.
Yeah.
And so
not the divine masculine, but what do they call that?
Shadow, I'd call
shadow
it more
masculine. Yeah.
Yeah,
what we're taught.
What we're taught. Yeah. Uninitiated men teach more uninitiated men of put your emotions in a box.
Don't feel.
Well, really, because it's about handling mission, and there's no room for emotions when you're on mission. But I think we're at a different awareness now that we're coming back to. So traditional masculine man that would put things in a box, and that works really well for getting in shape and achieving in sports and achieving in career. And it worked for a lot of death. I went through a lot of death early on. I had about 17 friends death, whether through suicide, addiction, accidents, murder, all kinds of messy stuff. But I was a guy that's I got you. Would show up, calm the scene down, and could really navigate comfortably in those scenes. And then it wasn't until 2008, my brother, we have a really, really tight family, really close. And my brother came to see me for Christmas and said, hey man, things have gotten heavy. I'm now addicted to heroin and it's gone to like shooting needles. And if I go back to Reno, I'm going to die. I feel like I'm going to die. So I need to come stay here with you. Because I was in Manhattan Beach on the water in this really beautiful spot. And I just started a business. I'd maxed out my credit cards at the time. And I tried moving him in before and didn't know how to take care of him. And so told him, no, can't do it, man. Like, I'm in this startup company and I can't take care of you. And there's beer bottles just in a weekend all over the house. And I got computers all over my living room. And so I said, can't do it. And he went back to Reno and died 3 days later of a heroin overdose.
What experience did that create for you after that happened? Immediately I think, was it guilt and shame and pain and grief and all of it, but did you take that on?
No, I mean, I did what I was taught, essentially. I cried when I woke up to like 27 missed calls and knew, like I've never had 27 missed calls from my parents. So I just knew and started bawling before I even called them, and then decided, like, intention was like, they can't take care of this. I got to take care of them. So I literally put it in a box and flew home, led the service, took care of family.
Push the feelings down.
Yeah, just put them in a nice little box. So like, I can't.
Because that was your programming. That was your pattern.
The programming. Like, you take care of everybody else. So I flew back. I actually led the service because I didn't trust anybody else to lead it. And I did I thought a good job of sharing his memories. I had people laughing and like, I wanted to honor him. And so I did that. And then, it's funny, just a random moment. I remember like I was so ashamed of my emotions. Then I remember like going in the shower the day of the service and getting on the ground, literally on the ground in the shower, begging like, please give me the faith to like lead the service by not having any emotion. Like, how do I model the example of like, so I could share his vibrancy in his life.
That's how much it was ingrained. Don't feel feelings. That was ingrained. Please, God, don't let me feel feelings, right?
So I can honor him.
So you can honor him, right? The programming of that.
So which I did. I mean, I had people laughing and telling his stories and, and then I flew back and basically put that in a nice little box and went to building this business that I had. And we were just getting about success and like the 100K marks, 150 marks. And then 2008 hit and went from like this to
I remember that.
Crash.
The crash, the mortgage crash, the banking crash.
Mortgage crash, business partner and I started fighting. And then I came home one day and was like, this business isn't working, and found out him and my girlfriend were together. So basically one moment, found out my business partner and my girlfriend were behind my back. And in one moment lost my business, my girlfriend. They basically hijacked it and took off and moved to another place. And so then I went bankrupt because I had funded the business. So I lost all these things at once. And then there's one more piece to the story, but right. So that happened. So the thing that I'll get to that in a second. So this happens. And so I'm sitting there in the ashes. I don't sit in them though. I do what I've been taught. I handle the house. I give everything to charity. I said, I'm gonna clean myself with this energy. That's what I gotta, move on.
Put it to the side, move on. Do the next project.
And a couple friends are like, hey, come get your mind off things and come to Tahoe for a celebration for like New Year's. And I went there and somehow my friend gave me some substance and I ended up putting it in my pocket and I ended up getting handcuffed and go to jail. So I'm sitting in jail with all this.
Let's just throw jail on top of
Let's just throw jail on top. So that was really the moment. I'm sitting in a cold jail cell. And I remember I was so like raw that I was like, externally the world felt so raw to me. I felt like I was naked and getting kicked. And so I literally just was meditating. All I could do, I just sat in my cell meditating and that's all I could do. Because I was like, I can't even see the external world. I'm so raw. And that's when I really hit me. I was like, oh, I chose this path over my brother.
And it was the universe that had to sit you in a jail cell to actually, with a little substance in your pocket, to go to a jail cell because you were going to go on to the next. It was the universe, got chills right now, co-conspiring with your higher self, with you, to get you to sit to feel. Because you weren't going to feel that shit.
I still didn't feel.
Well, to even get you to realize it.
Right? But like to get the impact of what happened.
Isn't that incredible? So, all right, so this leads me to the next question. You've bottled all this up your whole life. I can't even imagine that energy is then misdirected into the false masculine, the dominance, the creation energy, all of that, right? What was it like for you to have these feelings all bottled up and pushed aside? What did it feel like?
I couldn't feel.
Okay, so what was that?
I was numb. And so at the time, I'd learned to put them so much in a box and dissociate. Now I have a lot more awareness. I was disassociated from childhood, so I couldn't feel. I'd learned this was armor. So for me, my armor was work. It was like, oh, something doesn't work. How quickly, it's like sports, you strike out. It's not, do you sit in your emotions? It's how quickly can you get up and go handle things? So that was my conditioning, is not to feel. Instead, it's like, how quickly can I get back up and get back into action? I thought that meant I was resilient. So for me, that was it, is like, no matter what happens, how quickly can I get back out in the world, back into success, whatever success looks like, was my way of being back into action.
I've never had anyone articulate it this well. That is very well articulated. And I'm sure many men and women can relate to this. I know I can. Tell us what it was like when that bottle just exploded, and when things just, when those feelings came out. I want to know that experience. When, tell me when, and how, and what.
It takes a moment to get there. What I will say is I'll give the cliff notes to get there.
Please.
So helpful. So what I did at that point is, that's when friends said, hey, plant medicine, like you're in pain. So I went into plant medicine. I started working with shamans. I also did a bunch of different alternative therapies, psilocybin and a lot of stuff to try to, which did help a little bit. The shaman gave me some forgiveness work. I had some compassion for my business partner and my ex. So it helped with those pieces. And then I went to go work with Tony Robbins as a speaker and trainer, and was like, let me use all the mindset tools on changing my mind, changing my state, changing my psychology. So I went really deep and thought I fixed it. And it wasn't until grief and death kept coming back as like my purpose, and I kept starting to help people, and I'd always done that, but it wasn't until like I get hit a couple more times, I'll save you the heartache of this pattern playing out again and again and again, because when you're suppressing things and you just go try to build, you loop the same patterns and you loop it again and again. So I would loop it, fail, loop it, fail, loop it, fail. And then one day I was like, all right, God, I surrender. Like, what do you want me to do? And in that moment, in this deep surrender, I had this process I did where I said, what am I actually going to remember at the end of my life? I'm around death all the time. We're all going to death. We're all going to die. And I sat down and I wrote, what do I remember of my life? And I started to capture it, and it was moments. It was like moments of a surprise I did for my mom, or sacred moments of love, or sacred moments of loss. And there was like these very specific moments I could remember, but I didn't remember any late work nights. I didn't, like, all the work I'd been doing, I didn't have any of those. So I was like, oh, this is the actual game. Interesting. And then secondly, I said, well, what is my actual gift? And the gift that it was said is, you're naturally optimistic. Like I came out of the womb, like kind of seeing the glass half full. And I said, okay, well, what would I do if I had no fear? And it said, you put it in the darkest place on the planet. And so I was like, death and grief. So I was like, oh, so I have to make my work around death and grief. But that's what actually led me to say, okay, I'll do this if I can create a little bright light in the darkest, deepest parts of people's lives. And I had no fear. That's what I do. So that became the process. And so, again, I'm just giving you little clip notes to get to there. But then that led me down a long journey of starting to get on grief forums, starting to volunteer at hospice, starting to do all this work around people dying, veterans that have nobody there. And I'd walk the hallways with them. And here I'm taking kind of the Tony Robbins approach and failing. Here I'm on grief forums trying to help people with these mindset tools and failing. And so I was like, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And so that's when I started a documentary, started interviewing grief and trauma experts. Wow. And then along that process, trying to help other people, I finally realized one day, like, oh, I have unresolved grief. And so that was really the awareness. First, I needed like the cognitive awareness. And it was a moment when a mentor, and he said, this is kind of the moment that hit me, is he said, we're broken and whole. Because most of personal development is like, we're whole. We're avoiding feeling broken. Yeah. And instead, the duality of like heartbreak means like when you fall deeply in love with someone, a belief, a dream, our body, a vision, our childhood, our innocence, there's so many things we fall in love with, and then it's taken from us and we're heartbroken. We're like deeply heartbroken. It feels broken. And it's in that accepting the heartbreak is actually what in the ability to know we're whole and heartbroken, and that full acceptance of the duality is actually what brings us back into wholeness. So that one nugget, I needed the awareness from my cognitive brain to get it.
Correct.
Before my body had permission to go into it, because I couldn't ignore this truth. It was like, like a seed right into the heart, like boom, right? So that was the moment that allowed me to open to then start the journey to actually start to feel.
You and I have such a similar journey, years. 2008, my father passes away. 5-year relationship. I find out she's with her boss. And then my business just crumbles. I was in real estate, bankruptcy, all 2008, grieving my dad, moving to Austin, brand new, and it's such a similar path. And I remember that was one of our connections. One thing that I learned was you're nailing it with the cognitive, and it was like, name it to tame it. Okay, I had to name it to tame it. I had to understand what was going on for me. Then that opened up the space to be able to feel it, to heal it, right? Feel it to heal it. And that's when the emotions just started feeling safe to come out because I could understand it. So there's something to that. There's something to like understanding it cognitively, the patterns, the process, how I was programmed. Oh, okay, putting the dots together, naming it to tame it, and then being able to, then the feelings can come and we can feel to heal. Would you say that resonates?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'll also say, when you're saying that, what came up for me is, because I work with a lot of like Navy SEALs, Green Berets, like who are the tough guys, quote unquote, that have a really tough time. And this is one of the things that I say usually to try to overcome that old stigma. One, all ancient warrior cultures had resiliency practices, which involved getting emotional to come back into life, because it was looked at that when you lose a piece of your soul, you need to get that back in order to come back into the tribe. So Spartans, samurai, all ancient warrior cultures had practices, regulation, purification, reintegration practices to get reintegrated. So all warriors did it. We just lost it. And then two, like sitting with your emotions, if you can feel, because there's a lot of men who don't know how to feel because they're frozen like I was. But if you can feel, what's easier? What's more courageous? If a strong, powerful man or woman will do what's courageous, what's harder? When you feel something, putting it in a box? Or actually going in and feeling that and getting messy with it and like feeling the anger and it's much harder to feel out of control, to feel uncontained, to like let this messy stuff move through you than it is to put it in a box and function. So I'd say strong, courageous men and women will do what's hard. So that's harder. So then usually when I say that, there's no, my point, it's like, okay, now my brain has permission to go into because I want to do the hard things because I identify as a strong or powerful man and woman. So you can't escape that frame, right? It's like...
Well, and we both got into what's now called men's work. There's men's work, there's grief work, there's healing shame work. And you see companies and communities like Sacred Sons and Mankind Project. And there are all kinds of communities now that we're going out as men and being able to go into a safe space and feel our feelings. Grieve the things we never got to grieve, whether it's for our ancestors, our fathers, our parents, our inner child. Like, we're learning to grieve. We're learning to let out our anger. One of the biggest things for me was getting in touch with my anger. Like, I was so afraid of my anger that I was just a people pleaser. Don't rock the boat. Tell you what you want to hear. No, avoid conflict, because I didn't know how to express my anger. So then guess what? It came out sideways. It started coming out and snapping on people. It came out in road rage. It came out leaking out sideways. When I was able to go into a container, like the work you lead, and be able to get in touch with that anger and feel it and let it out. I remember these men, they would say, they would somehow help get it out of me. And I carried 5 men across the room in a men's work process. And now I can be angry and feel it and not be afraid of it. I don't have to tiptoe around it. I don't have to hide from it. I don't have to people please. I can just be like, I'm angry right now, and not direct it at anyone. Does that resonate?
Yeah. When I was interviewing David Kessler, he said, anger is the bodyguard to sadness, to fear and sadness. Wow. And so a lot of times I find there's two primary patterns. There's the pattern of like the man who gets really angry and he offloads his anger everywhere. Yeah. And there's the pattern of the man who suppresses the anger. And with the suppressing, if we can't access it, those are usually like similar. You and I had the same pattern. Yeah. Nice guys.
And then you blow
up. Like, yeah, because it's like a pressure cooker.
Right.
Whatever you suppress,
yes,
it builds and builds, and then it offloads where you least expect it. Usually on the people we love.
Yes, and then I would hurt relationships. So if you're watching out there, and we've had a relationship, and my anger, I apologize to you. And it's something that I own, in that I lost relationships because of it. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that'll happen is on the flip side, not knowing how to contain it, it burns everything down. So a lot of times rather than, and this is what's interesting, rather than face and do the work to feel and move that energy, we'll burn everything down and self-sabotage everything because it's safer than feeling that.
Correct. Because then once our anger comes out unhealthily, in an explosion, because we've been bottling it, then we experience, at least for me, that's when I experience this shame. that I wasn't processing, the guilt that I wasn't processing. So then I would get eaten up by the shame and guilt. And then I would go out and use something to numb that. And it was just a spiral. And I called it the shame spiral. And it was learn about it. Yeah. And so once I was able to get in touch with the anger, the grief is underneath the anger. Well, guess what's underneath the grief? From what I found, joy. Joy bubbles up from the grief. I remember, going through my kind of religious phase in my life, and I was really into, just worship and love and God and church. And I remember reading a Psalms that said, God loves a broken and contrite heart. And when I got in touch with that, when my heart was broken, and I can experience being a broken heart and grieving, there's so much joy and love that comes through that process. And it's fascinating. Is that
Yeah,
what
well,
you
just to
find?
go deeper into that, 100% in agreement. Just a slightly different frame, but same concept is two things. One, if we suppress our grief and our sadness and our anger, we also suppress our joy, our happiness, and our aliveness.
That's it.
So a lot of men, women experience it too, but a lot of women that are like, I just feel neutral, or their spouses are like, I can never feel you, or why aren't you giving me your feeling?
Yeah.
It's because they're not going, I call it the descent, they can't experience the ascent. So really grief work, or allowing yourself to somatically go and be with the grief or the sadness or the anger, descend. When you go into that, you get back, what we're doing is we're descending to the heart.
That's it.
So what we're doing is we're going from the head,
Yep.
and if we suppress this, we're armored up to here, so we lose the body, we lose our ability to feel life, experience all of our senses, all the subtleties that make life beautiful. And what we do is instead we end up living from the head. We're surrendered here. So life becomes dull. I use a metaphor to say, imagine like back in the day when you had armor and you had a helmet and you had a little slit in your helmet and you had all this armor. And then I use this metaphor usually for like police or fire or military, but imagine you walk up the door, and how do you open the door with armor on? What can you feel? And then your spouse comes up and gives you a hug. Your kids come up and hug you, but how much can you actually feel them? And how much can they feel you through the armor? And then you go out and watch a sunset. It's like, but if you could take the armor off, you can now feel sensation. You can now feel so much more. So when you're able to go in and feel the grief and the sadness and the messiness, we're in our heart and we're present. And now we're like, oh, I can feel joy and laughter and happiness and aliveness. So it really,
Being.
yeah,
Just pure being, pure essence.
because you're in the moment.
Because when we're in that place of armor that you use, and we haven't expressed our anger, we haven't expressed the grief underneath the anger, if we haven't expressed the anger, and then the sadness that's trapped, and then of course underneath that is the shame and the spiral underneath that when it leaks out, then what are we doing? We're numbing. And how do we numb? How did I numb? I'll just speak for myself. I played a lot of fantasy football. I watched porn. I would overdate, swipe. I'd overwork. So numbing just doesn't have to be about drugs and alcohol, right? Because I was actually sober doing all this in my trauma work. I was still sober. And so it was just interesting how we can numb in so many different ways.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So I'm on the same boat, whether it be porn, sex, dating, alcohol, food,
Right. Gambling, poker, online poker. I remember that was a phase.
addiction, but helping other people.
Oh, dude, helping other
Gym
people is a
addictions.
big one. Wanting to help and rescue everyone.
Most coaches and therapists, a lot of them are
Wow,
avoiding.
coaches and
dealing with their
therapists,
own
they're
work
going to
to
school
help
for it,
everybody
bless
else.
their heart, but they're almost in that pattern yet. So it's not until we can really tap into expressing and feeling our anger and our grief, which leads me to this question, Josh. Where can people go right now who are watching, listening, that resonates? Where can they go?
There's not a lot of spaces. I mean, I think more and more coming up. I'd say right now, breath work's on the mend. Anything that gets you in the body.
Yeah.
Like if I'm just speaking broadly, like anything that gets you in the body. So somatic-based practices, regulation practices, which are all body-based practices that get you in the body. Come to a somatic grief circle here, what we're doing at the Within Center, and walk through a process of getting into your body with a group of people so you're not alone doing it. So I'd say my at least belief is that we're now in a consciousness that people are ready and aware. Because I see breath work all over the place popping up, which that seemed a little scary before. Yeah. And so I think now we're at a time where there's a lot of ways to do it. For me, big picture, there are some natural ways for people that are against substance to get into the grief. A lot of it are somatic based, which basically somatic means body. So you're able to use the body through just they're actually very basic, simple breath, simple movements. And everything's stored in the center column. So when we're getting the grief work, it's all
it's right here.
It's all here.
It's right here in the center
So
column.
we're doing movements and we're doing sounds and movements. A lot of the sounds bring it up and we're basically going into it and it literally just moves. And so when you can learn to do it couple other pieces. A lot of the relationship dysfunction is unhealthy attachment, meaning there's whole attachment theory. We didn't attach to our parents when we were young, so we attached to external things. Yep. So this is a good practice if you start to become aware that's what you're doing, looking for external validation. Wow. It's another way to numb. Wow. You have to notice when you're feeling these uncomfortable emotions and learn to do the somatic grief practices, and it'll get you back in your body and you can self-regulate. So you can self-regulate, you can self-attach versus externally attach, you can feel love and joy and aliveness. So there's a lot of things that can happen, but it's getting in the body. Like just where can they go? They can go in the body.
Yeah. It's one thing we do at the Within Center is that, people will come in and we'll do an assessment. And like a lot of the times we find it's pretty much a lot of this. I mean, we're all different and unique, but we're also very similar where there's untapped anger, untapped grief, untapped guilt, untapped, and then they've been on medications or whatever to suppress that. And then they're numbing with other things. So it's a whole big picture of they then go into a blindfold psychedelic session. We have a guide that then they hold an intention. My intention is to heal. My intention is to get in touch with my anger. My intention is to grieve. My intention is to feel. And it's a whole program around like not just the psychedelic therapy, right? Because you said you can get into a breath work, you can get into so many things, but then we have breath work classes, and then we have your somatic grief work class, and we have therapy, we have coaching, things like that. Tell us a little bit about your somatic grief work, because that's what I got to experience it in our group that we're in. Tell the viewers about the work that you do.
Yeah, I'd say I feel like I'm a steward. Like I'm kind of stewarding and allowing people to steward them into their body through some simple practices. The general concepts are, one, I like community because we are formed in relationship, we are wounded in relationship, and I believe we need to heal in relationship. So part of healing is being witnessed together. So creating really safe containers. The container is really important so that you have a really safe space to masculine build container for the feminine expression.
The nervous system almost needs to feel that safety.
That's what I'm saying. So to get into grief is messy and it's all over. You have to build a safe container.
How do you do that? How do you build a safe container?
So one, if somebody's doing it at their house, they could create a little special space with nobody around. They could light some sage or Palo Santo. They could put crystals, like how this is formed or how I have so either create a space on your own or join a space where you trust the facilitator who's already created a safe container for you to then be in that expression. So think of it as you need a safe place to be expressive. Otherwise, again, it comes out sideways, otherwhere else, or it comes out through numbing. So we're first creating a safe space.
What's a red flag for people if they don't feel safe? Like, what could you tell someone is like, hey, if this happens, then it's probably not safe?
Good question. Typically, safe energy feels safe. Again, in your body will relax a little bit. If you're on tense and you challenge somebody, they'll be really genuine and compassionate and caring. Like I track the energetics. Yeah. The energetics is gentle. Easiest way to say it. If it's directive or persuasive or pushing you somewhere is to me a red flag. If it's like, hey, check in. If at any time you don't feel comfortable, you can leave, or like they're literally you're always in control. So to me, that maybe is the primary areas. You're always in control. They put it back on you. They support you to do the work. They're not telling you, directing you, influencing you, none of that. They're literally creating the space for you to heal with yourself.
You just nailed it, because that's what I see as well. And, speaking vulnerably, before I could get to a place of healing my own nervous system and feeling safe and belonging and love and here, that was only when I could then give it away and hold, right? Because for a long time, I was the one that was trying to persuade or help. And people can feel, I think we can feel, since we can listen to our intuition, because our body knows, our intelligence of our body, that we can feel if someone's projecting their own shadow onto us. But if someone's done enough shadow work to then be in the moment, be in love, not trying to do or force and just hold, you can feel it. So I think that's what I would tell people as well. It's just tune in and see if you actually feel safe in that person's presence.
Yeah, I love that, because we're only as good as the work we've done. Yeah. And it is something you see a lot of coaches, which I didn't do in my past. I felt like an imposter a lot because I was an imposter, right? So I think that's part of the healing journey. Is there are phases you go through until you learn, unless I'm doing the work regularly, I don't know how to see it in other people. And then when you do it regularly, our efficacy is in how we show up. Literally right now, every moment, we're showing our efficacy in the practices we do and what we do privately. People can feel it if they're in their nervous system. And so empowering people to get into your nervous system, you either get a yes, I feel safe because somebody's presence makes me still feel safe, or I feel constricted, or I want to run, or something doesn't feel safe, so trust it.
Oh man. Why do you love this work? Why do you love doing what you do?
That's a deep question. I think it's twofold. One, I tried to figure it out and couldn't, humbly. And so I've chosen to give myself to Source. And I look at it like I'm God's warrior. That's literally I'm like, hey man, you ripped everything apart that I wanted. And so that comes from like a humbleness.
Job.
Yeah, it's like, hey, everything I wanted, I haven't been able to make happen, like
Right.
humbly. And it's sad, and I have a lot of grief around it. And so it's like, all right, then where do you want me to lead? I've had a lot of death, I had a lot of loss. And so it's like, all the things I wanted to try to manifest, I couldn't. So it's like, all right, how can I serve you? If you've weaponized me as a warrior, how do you want me to serve? And I'll follow. And so I look at what is creating consciousness, what is creating the trees, the life, the nature, the bodies, like what's the origin point? How do I serve that consciousness? And so I'd say that's number one. And then number two, when I do, I feel at peace. Mm-hmm. So it's less on, and when I don't, and when I try to control it, I feel constricted and I feel controlling and nothing happens. And when I go back to that, it feels at peace. So it's more for me wanting to be at peace than it is anything, and more to trust the process. And then three, I guess the benefit is it gives meaning to the pain. It gives some meaning to the pain that I've been through in life, or the meaning to the pain and suffering, purpose. It gives purpose, like, I would still want it back, and I can see that all the suffering I've been through is going to a purpose because I'm able to sit with people where nobody else is. I'm able to navigate deeper and be with and people are like, I finally feel seen through some really horrific shit. And in those moments, it's because of the pain that I've had to go through is why I've had to open. It's forced me to open. So I think it's some of those moments, and we've done a lot around suicide prevention, and I've heard a lot of like, you saved my life. And I don't think it's me. I kind of give it to Source, but I've listened. And I know okay, I did listen, and I still took the actions, but I get a lot of that, and I can feel really blessed. But it's tricky, man. I got to say, there's like I'm grateful, and I have to continue to live a life of service, which has been hard too. It's like I wanted the sexy, cool entrepreneurial thing. That's what I wanted. And instead, this is my path. So I've had a lot of conflict with Source. Like, why do I have to do the grief?
It's almost like shedding. You've had to go through your own personal shedding.
I have to keep shedding. Like, this is my path. Like, I want this thing. Yeah. You want me to do this thing that everybody runs from?
The yacht, the Lambo, the love, the come on, all this life.
Exactly. And I have to keep surrendering. But when I do, and I'm just open, things flow. Yeah. And I can see the synchronicities. I get alignment and connection with a brother like you that we connect really deep. Yeah. So when my ego or my head or my desires get out of the way, and I can just humbly be like, all right, that all falls away, because that was my own inadequacies. My own inadequacies and stories. I wanted all these things to have, which are really, you can't take with you anyway,
let's
right?
Let's talk about this. Growing up in the 80s, what did we see? We saw Superman and He-Man, and we saw the successful, the baseball players, the football players, all making all this money, the magazines, MTV. Like, we were almost programmed to think that's what we need to be happy. We need this out here to be happy. The money, the success, the fame, the status, the parties, right? And I was programmed by that. It lured me away. And a very similar story. For so long, I wanted all those things. And yet here I am today at 43, and I get to say that what's important is the relationships in my life, the presence in my life, the joy in my life, the love in my life, the connection with my daughters, with my partner, with my friends, my fun in playing pickleball. I don't care what I drive anymore. I don't need to have that, sport, like, Corvette or the Lamborghini. I don't need to have the private plane, because for a long time I did think that's what I thought was going to make me happy. Happiness is connection for me now. In love, and just following what I love. Like, I love playing pickleball. I love spending time with friends. I love going to good restaurants. It's just following my bliss. Like Joseph Campbell said, I just get to follow whatever I love.
Yeah, I'm finding the same thing. I'm finding that it's shifted quite a bit from what I thought. And I think it's also helped because I've coached a lot of really successful entrepreneurs with unlimited amounts of money. And I'm like, oh, like the money didn't change it. They still have the same challenges. It's now bigger challenges because they have harder blocks, because they're like, so really, when you get down, it's the really basic, simple things of like going through a walk, connection to nature, connection to families, connection to friends.
100%.
Like appreciating life, gratitude for the really basic things that give you joy.
And you know what's interesting? I don't know if you saw this, but we work with, people who are wealthy and have money and have spent their whole life making money. What I find is interesting is that they just keep giving it away because they made it all thinking they were going to feel something, but now they're still numb. They're still not finding that love, purpose, joy in the moment of aliveness. And they're like giving their money away to their friends. They're like, spending it like it's not the money. They spent, and like for me, I spent my whole 20s and early part of my 30s trying to get that. So, man, wow. Tell us about how people can find you and your work. Like, how can people find you?
Yep, I'm joshuawenner.com, just JOSHUAWENNER.com. I'm also Joshua Michael Wenner on like Instagram, Facebook, those things. And those are probably the easiest ways. And I'm in men's work. I have a men's community called K4. I help first responders, fire, police, veterans, and valor, resiliency. I do one-on-one with entrepreneurs, both men and women, and then I just started working with women. So I have a women's retreat I'm doing, and I'm doing more women's work. So, more embodying different parts of self and practicing rearranging the protective sides to like aligning them with our higher aspects.
Yeah, because, to learn, to be with you and to know the stripes that you've had to go through, the shedding processes, the death processes, the releasing. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's had to shed as much and to then have you emerge into the next version of yourself, the vibration, the butterfly from the cocoon, right? Mini cocoons. Like what an honor it is to do work with you and have been impacted by your work, and that people can actually, come and sit with you and have their lives can be completely changed.
Thank you, brother. And it's an honor to sit with you. I love the work you're doing in the world. I love what you've created. That's why it's a really good synergistic flow to be doing similar work, similar alignment, similar values, and wanting to serve in a similar path. Like we've both gotten here through a lot of humbleness, a lot of shedding. A lot of shedding.
I've lost so many best friends lost my father. I've lost a lot of people as well. I don't know about you, but the greatest joy that I get, other than like just seeing my daughters every day and that medicine, but the greatest joy is seeing someone go from coming in completely disjointed and disconnected and overweight, inflamed, to going through the process, to being awakened and healed and enlivened in love and fully in the moment in those transformations. I don't know if there's a better joy in seeing that. And that's why I do this work. Is that something you find in your work?
Yeah, it's deeply fulfilling. I guess I kind of skipped the part of when you asked me about it. It's deeply fulfilling to watch people take charge of their life and to like literally just make some small adjustments. Yeah. And they're going from living an emotionally imprisoned life to like a deeply, deeply fulfilling life when they realize they have control. They have control to be like, oh, my emotional state and presence dictates how my spouse responds to me, how my kids respond to me. So them being able to do that, they're like, oh, my son now wants to spend more time with me. My spouse is like, oh, you see me. Like, so being able to support them and giving the gift is valuable. But I guess for me, I still have like they do it. So there's a part of me that's like, I'm honored to it, but they're still doing the work. So it's like I try to be as neutral as I can. Yeah. So it's like I'm honored by it, but it's also they're doing the work. So I'm proud of them for doing the work. But it's like when I was younger, I think I took more credit. So I try to be really neutral with like, I'm serving, I'm out of the way. They're choosing to or not. And I'm really grateful and honored when they get to do it. I get to celebrate with them,
It's interesting you say that, because for me, I have a different perspective now. To me, someone explained it to me, a teacher explained it to me like this. Imagine the Big Bang, the universe is like a piece of big glass and it just breaks and it shatters. There are big pieces, there are little pieces, there are specks, and we all our souls represent the coming back together of the glass, right? And that my glass is touched with however many pieces of glass, and those are the souls that you actually meet, because we're all one. So it's my story. This is how I come up with my cosmology of how my life is. But like all the people in my life that I've impacted they're impacting me. So for example, I have clients that have come here and lives have been transformed, awakened, healed. Well, then they come into my life and they become family. And then maybe I'm struggling now, and now they're helping me learn something. And the way I relate it is that if you ever ran track, like you have the person that runs out with the baton first, and then that's me. I've always been a trailblazer, pioneer. I'm running out with the baton. I've always been a sprinter. And then I pass the baton to the next person, and then they go, but then I'm tired. And then I'm freaking worn out. And then I'm maybe struggling in an area. And then they come back around and they're able to help me. And it really is just, we're all one, supporting and loving each other. And we all have different seats on the bus. But
Beautiful.
That's
I
how
love
I
that
relate
metaphor.
to it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Really appreciate you being on this podcast and this show and whatever this is. But it's really an honor to have you here, man. And I love you. And I can't wait for you to come back again.
Thanks, brother. Love you too, man. It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you for joining us today on the Going Within podcast. The Going Within podcast is sponsored by Within Center. Within is a ceremonial psychedelic-assisted wellness center in the heart of Austin, Texas. Discover more about our transformative practices at within.center. If you enjoyed this episode, we kindly invite you to follow us and share your thoughts with a review. Going Within is hosted by David Naylor, production led by Patrick Stanger, and filming and production by Rare Media. Please note the statements made on Going Within have not undergone evaluation by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. At Within, we strongly recommend consulting your healthcare provider for personalized guidance on the diagnosis and treatment of any disease or condition.